Hello and welcome back to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. I'm Michael Regan, along with my fabulous co-host, Kathryn Peterson, and we love bringing you new episodes each and every Wednesday on your favorite podcast platform. And we try to focus on topics that we think will, in fact, help you build a bigger life. So whether at home or at work, we're looking for topics and guests that we think elevate the conversation, and we hope today is no exception. We're going to take a look at what we're calling the meeting mindset, and we want to help you as top performers learn how to show up and stand out when you're in the context of a team meeting. So, Kathryn, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the frame, and really happy to dig into this topic with you today.
Yes, absolutely. I think we could spend so much time on meetings, and it's just another way to make things effective. So let's talk about this one.
Yeah, that's ironic. We could spend more time talking about it, and yet that for a lot of people, the idea of more meetings is nails on the chalkboard. So my hope is some of the things we're going to help you think about today might help you make your meetings more effective, maybe even more efficient in the process. But the idea is that meetings shouldn't suck. They should be something that are really valuable to any of those that have carved out time to be in them. And so there
Mhm.
are some things I think we can do, but let's start with just a basic question. I mean, Kathryn, you've been in a lot of team meetings, and let's put these team meetings in the context of maybe the larger team. Meaning, I know you have your own personal production team, and there's some value with those meetings. But let's look uphill a level and say, okay, when you gather, like you come to Lake Oswego and you meet with Patrick's group, and you're with a lot of the other branch leaders. Why are team meetings so important to you, and why would they be, really important to our audience?
I think they really help drive that culture. And it's very different to be in the same room with somebody and you can read them better, understand them better than if you're trying to do a meeting online, for example. But I think it really does build that culture. And I feel like people will participate more, no different than why I like my clients to come here in person. It's just having a meeting, as long as it's done effectively, people will participate more if they're all together versus, hey, let's send an email around that we all ask. So sometimes you just have to have a meeting to build that culture.
All right. Well, you kind of danced around this, so let's just dig into where I would hope our listeners are thinking. So then, why are some meetings on Zoom or video, Teams, whatever platform you're using, and some are in person? What's the we're in a different era now on the other side of the COVID experience. We all understand the value and the efficiency of a video meeting, but why are live meetings still important to that culture that you speak of?
I think people can still tune out during those Zoom meetings. Even if you have a one on one Zoom meeting, people can get lost. And I think I at least find with my loan clients, they're going to ask me more questions if we're in person. I'm going to connect to them better if it's in person. And I either do meetings on video or in person, but those in person ones, they last longer. I think we get more to the issues we need to talk about. And I think part of it is being able to read somebody's body language a lot better if they're with me physically.
So in the team meeting context, when you're meeting in person, what are some things that matter? I mean, how do you know your role in that meeting, or how do you know how to prepare so that you show up in a great setting? What are some of the things that top performers should be thinking about when they get into that team meeting environment?
So I think some of it, there are times every time I come to that meeting, I get to sit with Michael ahead of time so that our listeners kind of have a lead into this, hence why he's really digging into these because we've had a lot of talks about the meetings. But I think one of them is to show prepared, but part of that being prepared is I think having an open mind. And I have definitely gone into that meeting without an open mind before. But I think that's something that is so important as far as the preparation goes is to go in with an open mind and being willing to listen to what you're hearing. And this is more as a participant than I think anything else. And you never know quite what to expect from a meeting, but I think going in, knowing you're going to make a difference and knowing that you're going to participate, I think are huge.
So I guess you're hinting at a topic, and I referenced it earlier. Are there times when your role in the meeting is just participant, and then are there times where you're a presenter? Are there times when maybe you're even the facilitator? h- how important is it to get that clarity ahead of time coming into that room? I mean, the obvious would be you want to be prepared regardless of the role, but what's the real key to knowing your role heading into that meeting? Because some people do just show up, um, but maybe didn't think ahead of time to ask that question.
Yeah, I think it's a good question to ask. Hey, why are you inviting me to this meeting? Do you want me to lead a section? Do you want me to just sit back and listen so I get an idea of the culture? Do you want me to throw in my ideas? How do you want me to be in this meeting? How do you want me to show up in this meeting? And I think that's a just fine question to ask.
I agree completely. I think anytime, we live in a world, I'll use Outlook because it's the most common tool. I guess Google has, the same function. Anytime I'm invited to a meeting with my team, that's exactly what I want to know. Why was I invited to this meeting and what is expected of me? If I am a
Mhm.
participant, am I an active participant or a passive participant? And those are two different versions of how I'll
Mhm.
come prepared. If I'm just a passive participant, I might bring a notebook and sit and listen and take some notes. If I'm an active participant, I'm going to bring specific questions, maybe some specific ideas, maybe some even a topic I want us to cover. It's definitely my responsibility as a participant. So again, if you're a top performer, um, showing up to the meeting isn't just being on time, isn't just maybe dressing appropriately for the environment you're in. It's this mindset of, do I know my role in this room and am I really prepared to execute at a high level? If you show up in a meeting and find yourself thinking, why am I here? Why did I get invited? I would hold the mirror up and say, well, did you clarify that before you came? Because if you did and they've duped you, well, then by all means, we've got a problem. It's pretty rare that someone's going to invite you to a
Mhm.
meeting under a false premise. I mean, I guess it happens, if you've been set up in a meeting, ignore my commentary. But if you're like most of us, you came to a meeting maybe with, you were optimistic, like, well, maybe this will be a good thing to be a part of, but you didn't ask questions and then you're discouraged later that this was a waste of your time. I think Kathryn's comments are spot on, to have the courage to say, hey, by the way, why did you include me? What do you need from me? How can I be of great value to this meeting? All right, that's great. Those are some smart questions to ask. What else would contribute to this meeting opportunity? Let's smoke this one out. You've now why you're there. You know the role you're going to play. You are prepared. What are some other things that might be smart questions to ask if you're going to be a great participant in a meeting?
Well, I think knowing what the outcome of the meeting is can help you say, hey, ahead of time, I'm going to think about some things that I might want to ask based on who's there. And hey, have you thought about this? Here's something I've been thinking about that could be an issue, and here's something that could correct that issue that I've thought about ahead of time. And I think some of that shows that you care about the topic and you're solution oriented. You're not there just to complain, or you're not there to send the meeting in a whole different direction either. You're actively participating in a positive way.
You used a phrase, and I hope our audience heard it. In often in a military context, we use the term desired end result, but it applies for exactly the context of this. Is that clarity of what do we need at the end of this meeting really helps streamline the focus for everyone, you included,
Mhm.
but everyone in the meeting. If we know what we're hoping to leave with in the next 30 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever the timetable is for the meeting, we're far more likely to push toward that goal. Fun fact, I just mentioned 30 minutes versus 40 minutes. Do you know that most meetings tend to take exactly the amount of time we give them? It seems that that's another key ingredient here. If you're going to be a great contributor to a meeting, really ask yourself, how much time does this topic really require? Because sometimes we just pick time frames like a 30-minute meeting because we think that's just a normal, yeah, that's what Outlook gives me. It's like a default. And maybe we only needed 10 minutes and the rest of it was a
Yeah.
lot of fluff.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. And I think it's also one of the things that I always feel like my role in a meeting is to help people who may not have talked, but I want to hear their words
Hmm.
to pull them out. Hey, Susie, what do you think of this idea? Because as somebody who's worked so hard on building my confidence over my career, that's difficult for people in a meeting. So I want to make sure I'm hearing, even if I'm not leading the meeting, as a participant, I might try to pull somebody else's opinion out or bring them to the front because I know that they're quiet. I know they're intimidated by the meeting and I want to hear their opinion.
I'm laughing. I think your illustration started with the hypothetical Susie, and I immediately thought of our old friend Jim McMahon, who used to have all of his little scripts for success, and Psycho Susie was always his example of the crazy processor that he had to work with.
She
Uh,
can't come to the meeting.
yeah, not invited.
Not
You're
invited.
invited, but your friends can't come. Uh, so, Kathryn, let's flip the script a little. If
Mhm.
How about if you're the one leading the meeting? You're responsible, you're the host of the meeting. You've called the meeting. So you might already know what you want from the outcome of this meeting because you've called it. So you need to do a really great job, of course, of as you invite people, being clear on why they're invited and what role you expect them to play. Again, whether active or passive. But can we talk about a few of the things that I think make up the structure of a generally great meeting? Because I think this will help us
Yeah.
embrace this great mindset for a meeting. And one of my biggest frustrations when I'm a participant in a meeting that I fight hard for as the host of the meeting is that if I've said we're meeting at a certain time, that we start the meeting on time. And not to be persnickety, not to be dismissive of someone that might be running late. But the truth is, if you're starting a meeting and unless everyone's running late because we've had some sort of, I don't know, catastrophic weather event or something that we need to, be aware of. I want to acknowledge that for the folks that did show up prepared and on time, I don't want to now lose credibility with that audience waiting for this random person or two that just
Hmm.
couldn't show up on time. And I think when you create a culture of our meetings start on time, most teammates tend to figure out pretty quickly, I better be
Hmm.
prepared early so I can show up on time. That's
Yeah.
definitely a place I like to start. How about you? Any thoughts on any meeting structures that resonate well with you?
You know, maybe it's because I'm so strange, but I sometimes like an agenda. If it's a long meeting, if it's going to be a day long, I kind of want to know when my break is going to be. So I know, do I have to have 7 granola bars with me or just 4? So I think that those are things that can be really helpful is at least if you don't say, hey, we're planning on ending around this time, if it's not super clear, and we're going to take a break after a couple hours so everybody can stretch their legs. Great. That at least sets up the room so that everybody knows what that's going to be like and what they're expected to do.
Such a good ingredient. The agenda should be prepared ahead of time. The agenda should be shared ideally ahead of time, but at least be available when people sit down. And maybe that's the first line item on the agenda is a quick overview of here's what we're anticipating from the day ahead. These are the, as you said, the break points that we intend to have. So great call out there. Let's look at some agenda items then, just as an
Mm-hmm.
example, because once you've got that agenda, I think one of the things I'm a big fan of is let's start off with some good news. Often in a
Yeah.
meeting, we have something to celebrate, and I don't know where we got this idea that we save the celebration for last. I'm not saying that's a bad idea, but often and when we set the tone up front with good news and a celebration, we're already we're bringing some energy, some positive energy to that meeting. And it's kind of hard if the meeting got difficult to suddenly end with this. Oh, and by the way, time to celebrate Kathryn's birthday. It's a little funky. I like the idea of let's kick off our meeting early with some good news and celebrations.
Yeah.
Another one I'm a big fan of is, in most organizations, we have some version of a meaningful scoreboard. And the scoreboard just means we're focusing on, as we've talked about in a previous episode, lead measures. What are the activities we are focused on, the key performance indicators that when we drive these activities, we tend to get the results we're looking for. A review of the scoreboard is always great. And then I'll throw a third in there because I know you're a big fan of accountability is let's review the commitments we each made and the accountability we have to what was on that scoreboard, because
Hmm.
often that's an opportunity for us to really cheer a teammate on or to help a teammate if they're struggling. Again, those are a few examples. Any others that you think are key ingredients to a good agenda?
I think that accountability piece at the end as well, like, hey, from this meeting, we're just gonna stick with Susie. Susie is going to streamline this process. Hey, in a few weeks, we're gonna circle back and here's the follow-ups that we've all agreed to. So I think just getting those wrapped up so that everybody knows from the meeting what we decided and who's doing what, that's a great way to at least start to finish off that meeting.
Yeah, I use different language around that, but I couldn't agree more. You know, at some point during the meeting, we've discussed the new information, we've discussed maybe some creative ideas around the topics, and we maybe have now honed in on some action plans, some things that we're going to take action on. And that's when I want to confirm the commitments. Okay, who has what? We just said these are the things we're going to do. Who has what? And you know, as a leader, sometimes I delegate and I decide who has what. Sometimes it's a conversation. It depends on the context of the action plans, but those commitments are critical to accountability because I really don't love accountability without a commitment. We walk into that weird
Mm,
space where we start, you know, shooting on our teammates. Well, you should have done this. You shouldn't have done that. And while I understand maybe where that can happen. Again, you know, going back to a previous topic around, you know, psychological safety that we've talked about on a prior podcast, that can really be difficult for a teammate if they feel like, oh, well, I wish you would have clarified the commitment around that because I didn't think I committed to that. Now you're holding me accountable to it. And I'm kind of embarrassed because
hmm.
you know you called me out. So
Yeah.
accountability is awesome if it's in some context of a commitment. Without that, it can be a little bit difficult for folks if they don't feel like they made that commitment. Hey, last thing on this one, and then we can move along. Is I mentioned starting our meetings on time. How about ending our meetings on time? You know, this is also
Hmm.
one that frustrates people. You ever been in a meeting where people are looking at the
Oh,
clock and they can see we've got 2 minutes to go, and someone says, "Listen, they throw out a new topic." What? You know, how did as a leader, remember, you are ridiculously in charge of this agenda that you set, and you will always get some combination of what you create or what you allow in that meeting. If you allow someone to hijack the last 5 minutes of the meeting and run their agenda ramrod all over everybody who's looking at the clock thinking, I thought you said we were ending at 4, and now I'm going to be late. Now I'm not going to get my work finished before the end of the day. Or now I'm going to be late for my kids, you know, practice or my family dinner or whatever they were thinking. Boy, you can really burn your whole value of that meeting quickly
yeah.
by not just ending on time. And you know how I know this is culturally true? It's the same thing that happens when we go fly. You know, if we all go to the airport and our flight leaves on time and it lands on time, most people are pretty happy with their flight because we know you can't control turbulence. But the
Hmm.
minute the flight starts late and the minute it's delayed on landing, people start to get agitated. And
Yeah.
so I like to end my meetings on time whenever possible.
And hey, one great strategy, whether you're a participant or a leader in a meeting, could be at the beginning of the meeting. Hey, over here is going to be an idea board for things we're going to table for later. Because we only planned 3 hours for this meeting and we need to make sure we meet that. So if we start getting on a topic, let's give permission to everybody. Go through that on the table. We'll table that for later. And we'll talk about it at the next meeting and or we'll have a separate meeting about it. But let's put that to the side because that keeps you on track throughout the whole meeting, which helps you end on time.
You're a meeting management Jedi. That is absolutely, yeah, top shelf. You know, you know I love whiteboards. You've been in plenty of meetings with me in rooms where I love the whiteboard, and I'm a big fan of. I'll draw a box up in the corner of the
Mm,
whiteboard, and sometimes people look at me like, "What's the box? Why are we drawing that?" And I tell them, "Oh, that's where we're going to put." All of the really interesting ideas that someone brings up today that weren't part of our agenda that we don't want to forget about because we want to come back to those. So at the end of the meeting, we're going to want to take a snapshot of that before we erase the whiteboard and decide about just what you said, future interaction with those great ideas. We just don't want them to hijack us from the purpose of today's meeting. So you are spot on with that one. So folks, look, if you're a participant in meetings or if you're a facilitator of meetings, hopefully you're grabbing some things here. But here's one thing I know. I think whether you are a person who can influence that meeting or you're the person calling it, we're talking about some best practices. Here are a few more you might want to grab. Anytime you've got a cadence meeting, so this could be like your sales meeting or your pipeline meeting or different cadence meetings where you're going to repeat these once a week or every 2 weeks. Really great idea if meetings happen on the same time, on the same day. Boy, does that make things easier for people in their calendar if they know, hey, that's a standing Monday meeting at such and such time. I know you guys have a standing meeting with your team that is on Fridays, if I remember correctly. And nope,
Tuesdays and Thursdays.
there you go. Okay, glad I threw that out there. Actually, we won't post edit that. It's important to know that I sometimes goof that up. Same time, same day, and then like Kathryn suggested, make sure that the agenda you have is as close to consistent with your cadence meetings as possible, meaning every meeting has the same framework to it. Now, the actual talking points will change from meeting to meeting, but the framework, if you can keep the agenda the same, people now know what to prepare for. So again, start on time and end on time. I've already talked about those. Those are all key ingredients to driving a really, really great meeting. Kathryn, before we wrap this up, any closing thoughts on the meeting mindset? Because we've seen a lot of top performers, and I want to make sure if we've left any gaps that we cover them. How should they show up, and how do they stand out?
Well, first, don't hesitate to tell your manager, hey, can we make this a meeting at a consistent time if they're not doing it? So give yourself permission to up manage, maybe they call it. But second, and I think a really important thing when you're a participant in a meeting is actually listen, take notes, ask really great questions. And there's some things that could move. Is there a better way to streamline this? Can we make something consistent so that everybody understands the process? Is there an SOP around this? Should we create one? So sometimes you can ask really important questions that move the conversation to action steps. So I think it's just learning some of those strategies in a meeting that you feel confident to participate in that way based on how you're listening, and a way to kind of get the group moving and being productive in a meeting as a participant.
By the way, for our show notes, those of you that heard SOP, that's a standard operating procedure. If you heard me earlier with KPIs, those are key performance indicators. We all read great business books, and sometimes we just think, oh, everybody says things like, these acronyms. But for those of you listening, that's what Kathryn's talking about. Kathryn, I think we've covered a lot here. I hope our listeners will grab something from this. And look, if you've got things to add as you're listening, like you may be sitting thinking, yeah, but what about this? You guys didn't even talk about that. Folks, that's what the show notes are for the discussion when we go to social media. So as we post on YouTube or as we post on our Instagram page, as we post in LinkedIn, those are great places for you to interact with our content. We'd love to hear your thoughts on how top performers show up and stand out in their meetings, and we'd love to have your thoughts added to ours as well. But let's put a wrap on today's episode. If you've tuned in, you're here on Building Bigger Lives each and every Wednesday, where we drop episodes for the entrepreneurial team leader, the person who is leading themselves and others with intentionality, and they're just looking for some key ingredients to be better leaders. We hope you're finding those with us as we bring guests and topics for that audience. And as we do each and every Wednesday, we hope you will listen, you will like, you will follow and share, because as you do that, that just helps us get our podcast out to a larger audience. And we hope that helps a few more people along the way. We'll look forward to seeing you again on an episode soon. Hope you have a great day, everyone.